Have you ever woken up and found yourself unable to move? You try with all your might, but your body just won't obey. Then, out of the corner of your eye, you see someone approaching, sitting on your chest, making it impossible to breathe. If yes, this was most likely sleep paralysis. We have collected stories from people who experienced some of the most nightmarish and terrifying forms of this brain trickery. Story 1. My limbs went numb, as if I had sat on my leg too long, but this numbness spread throughout my entire body. I was rigid, a hard, lifeless log of flesh stuck between the mattress and the blanket. I couldn't even scream at. Only a weak crackle came from somewhere inside when I strained with all my might. Sometimes during sleep paralysis, I would make dull humming sounds, putting all my energy into it. Occasionally, I would move a toe, but this time was different. I promised myself to remain calm, no matter what happened. I was conscious and thinking very clearly, trying to recall happy moments in life to push away the growing panic. I replayed scenes from sitcoms in my mind, reminding myself that I wouldn't always be paralyzed and would laugh about this later. Familiar sounds reached me, the noise of the radiator or the rustling of tires, but then I heard something that made my heart pound faster, quick and heavy footsteps on the stairs. I had experienced something like this before, but it never lasted this long. Fear engulfed me like a thick, sticky fog. All I could do was close my eyes, but before my eyelids shut, I saw a tall, terrifying figure in the doorway. Sometimes it was an old woman with a corpse-like, spotted pallor and a crooked grin. I called her the witch, recognizing her tangled hair and bloodshot eyes when she leaned over me again and again. Now there was a dark male silhouette, harder to discern but exuding power. Rarely did I see him, usually hiding behind the door, tilting his head to the side, watching me. This time he slowly approached. What happened next was what I had expected. He came up close, and I felt the mattress bend under his weight as he climbed onto the bed. A guttural grinding sound came from his throat. I squeezed my eyes shut as tightly as I could, but still felt him glaring at me with malice and fury. It seemed like hours before I regained control of my body, but I was still afraid to open my eyes, fearing to see this monster again. Waking up isn't like what they show in movies. You don't wake up in a cold sweat. It just feels like everything that happened to you just now was in another life. Story 2. When I experience sleep paralysis, I usually don't see hallucinations. I've only seen them a few times in my life. Auditory hallucinations happen much more often. Once, I was lying paralyzed, as usual, and heard someone whispering directly into my ear. Sometimes this voice calls me by name, and sometimes it just makes sounds like an animal's howl. I'm used to this and just ignore it. Ignoring and lying still doesn't always work, so I try to move. It rarely works, but when it does, my body feels like it's being torn apart by excruciating pain until I fall asleep again. I remember one incident. I was lying on my side, curled up, and heard a familiar howl. I just wanted to turn onto my back, so I tried to roll over, but instead, I only heard the hysterical scream of the hallucination, which began to scratch my back as if tearing off the skin. It felt like an eternity. My back burned with pain. It was the scariest episode of all. Story 3. I fell onto the bed and immediately fell asleep. It was dark around me, but my senses were still there. I felt drunk and kept falling somewhere. Then I heard footsteps. The sound was like someone stepping on the laminate flooring of my room. At that moment, I woke up and heard that someone was indeed walking around the apartment. I was lying on my stomach, my head turned to the right. I heard the footsteps again. I couldn't move. Then I felt someone sit on my legs and slowly climb up my body, pressing down on my back. I could barely breathe and felt hot breath on my neck. At that moment, I realized what was happening, but it took all my willpower to endure another 30 seconds of this weight, as if someone was really sitting on me. Story 4. I've experienced sleep paralysis several times, but this was the worst. I woke up and heard the front door slam. The dog didn't bark, and I found it strange. I wanted to wake my husband, but I couldn't move a finger. He was lying on his side next to me, but I couldn't touch him or call out. I heard the rustling of jeans. Someone moved from the living room to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and took out some ham. I heard the dog eating it. Once again, I tried to scream, wake my husband, push him, but it was all useless. At that moment, I realized he was dead. I don't know why I thought so, but I was sure of it. Heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor. Someone was heading to the bedroom. I closed my eyes, pretending to be asleep, but still tried to move. The man entered the room, walked around the bed, and leaned over me. I didn't open my eyes, but I knew he was right in front of me. He came closer to my face, and I smelled alcohol on his breath as he whispered in my ear, "He's dead, sweetheart, and you're next." Story 5. The jerking girl was my scariest sleep paralysis. It happened in 2017. That year was the most stressful of my life, with sleepless nights and cups of coffee. The paralysis started as usual with white noise and tingling spreading throughout my body. By then, I was used to sleep paralysis and was curious if the man in white, whom I called Knox, would appear. It was a mistake. The moment my eyes opened, the sensations intensified. The vibrations became stronger, and the white noise grew so loud it began to hurt. I could barely breathe, as if someone was choking me. While all this was happening, I heard a voice echoing in the darkness, repeating, "Play with me." I tried to calm down, knowing that fear only worsened the already unpleasant sensations. I began to breathe deeply and slowly, simultaneously trying to bite my tongue or wiggle my toes, as these actions often pulled me out of paralysis. It didn't work. The situation wouldn't have been so frightening if not for the girl with bulging eyes and a painfully thin body that appeared on top of me. She slowly crawled over me. For a moment she twitched, then returned to her original form. Her words scared me the most. She knew I was unsuccessfully trying to break free from the paralysis and wake up, so she whispered, "You will never wake up and will play with me forever." Then she added, "Looks like he'll come for you soon." She kept disappearing and reappearing, repeating the same thing over and over, constantly twitching and jerking. It felt like it lasted forever, and I was close to crying and dying right there, never waking up. Story 6. I don't remember the first time, but there were several episodes. They started when I was 11 or 12 years old. The worst one happened when I still lived with my parents. Opening my eyes, I saw my grandmother sitting on the edge of the bed. By then she had been dead for 10 years. I turned, nothing happened. I screamed again, nothing. Panic set in. She just sat and looked at me. I thought, okay, this will pass. When suddenly she jumped on my chest and screamed right in my face. Imagine the old woman from the movie Legion climbing on the ceiling. That's something similar. Story 7. When I was a teenager, I constantly saw things. I lived above the garage in a long, narrow room. A tall black figure, so tall it touched the ceiling, would come. It stood in the far corner and slowly approached until it was right above my ear. At that time, I didn't know what sleep paralysis was, so it was very scary. The scariest episode happened when I was already in college. I took a nap during the day, and the room was brightly lit by sunlight. I heard my neighbors talking behind the door in the hallway. But I knew it wasn't them, but something pretending to be them. Then the door to the room flew open, and something quickly ran inside. It ran on wide feet, very fast, approached my ear, hissed, and rushed away. It repeated this trick over and over, and it seemed like an eternity, though only a few seconds passed. As soon as I could move, I got up and went outside, thinking I was going crazy.